Boy, do we have a versus battle today. It is the OnePlus 13 versus the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. These are the two juggernauts of the year so far on using the new 8 Elite processor with a lot of RAM, but there are differences with these devices. Is it enough to merit one being more expensive than the other? Is it worth features over functionality? Let's talk about which of these devices you should be picking up. Of course, let's go through some specs here real quick. The S25 Ultra is rocking a 6.9-inch screen, while the OnePlus 13 is rocking a 6.8-inch screen. So size-wise, we are talking almost identical. There is a little bit of a curvature to the OnePlus 13. It's significantly less than it used to be. I don't feel like it is anything that is substantial. It actually makes a little bit of a nicer edge to the phone when holding it versus the sharp edges now of the S25 series. But that is totally up to you. You may prefer the sharp edges versus a little bit of a curve, but it's a very small curve to the glass. It's not like some of the older phones that Samsung or even OnePlus used to make. Of course, we're talking about both of these having similar resolution, 1440, and they both have 120 Hertz refresh rate. They are both adaptive refresh rate as well, and they have peak brightness, of course, very high as well. The S25 Ultra can get to 2500 nits, while the OnePlus Open can get to 4500 nits. Now this is in peak brightness. You would have to go in and force this setting, or if you're in direct sunlight. It does help though. You can definitely see this one in direct sunlight a little bit more than you can the S25. So if that's a big thing for you, there's one up for the OnePlus 13. On to RAM. RAM is very comparative in these two as well. Anything really honestly over 12 gig is plenty for Android phones, even if you're doing emulation, etc. But the S25 Ultra comes with 12 gig, and you can actually get the OnePlus 13 in 12 or 16 gig, depending on your storage variant. So if you go all the way to the 1 terabyte option, you can get this bad boy with the 16 gig as well. But really 12 gig, 16 gig, at that point, it's really minor differences. It obviously comes down to how many apps do you want running in the background? How often do you want those apps to keep stored where you left off before that app in the background shuts down? That's really what you're gaining with that additional RAM. With the S25 Ultra, the RAM is nice, having that 12 gig at least, which is good because you have DeX mode. So DeX mode is a little bit more power hungry because it's a desktop-like experience. So 12 gig is also great to have for the S25 Ultra. Camera-wise, of course, we have a lot of cameras on these devices. You could argue which one is subjective on looking more attractive. This down the corner line or this circular option where it is in the middle, kind of the middle of the device, but has this quad layout. Really preference. I don't really have an opinion on it. I would say the only thing that I would say that I feel a little bit better about the layout of the cameras on this is where your finger lands. Look, it's finger rest. So it kind of makes it a little bit more secure. It's wobble though, so get cases. Probably should have cases on this anyways, or at least skins, but they'll both wobble on tables. This one especially does, but camera layouts, pretty subjective. On to the actual cameras. The main camera sensor on the S25 Ultra is a 200 megapixel. 13 is a 50 meg. It's a 50 megapixel ultra wide. Each lens on this one does 50 megapixels. Where does it vary at that point on the S25? Well, that's one thing the S25 stepped up with this year. Otherwise, these are the same cameras, except the ultra wide has now finally bumped itself up to a 50 megapixel lens. There is still a 10 megapixel telephoto lens and a 50 megapixel telephoto lens. So there's actually two telephoto lenses. That's what these are over here for. But camera wise, spec wise, you have good quality, but you could argue that the main sensor in the S25 should be better because of the 200 megapixel. That 200 megapixel main, we should be seeing better quality photos. Of course, both of these are powerhouses in the video recording capabilities, both 8K, but another thing that the S25 comes out on top versus the OnePlus is log. So you can get that log format, go to pro settings, and then be able to do color grading after the fact. There's no pro features like that on the OnePlus, but they're both still great for video. This one just comes out on top, especially depending on what you're doing with it. If you're looking for a powerhouse camera for recording, maybe doing some YouTube work with it, this one's gonna be the guy to go with because of that log feature and color grading. Battery and charging, that is one thing that is quite different, and honestly, in my opinion, is one of the most important things about deciding on these phones. Battery size, 5,000 milliamps, sticking with the same type of battery it's been using for at least 2-3 generations now. The OnePlus Open 13 has a 6,000 milliamp battery in it. It has a new battery silicone technology in it as well that makes charging even faster. It has Super VOOC charging up to 80 watts. Guess what? It has wireless charging as well at 50 watts. You do have to use a specific wireless charger for that, but it supports wireless charging as well at 50 watts. What does this guy do? 45 watt wired charging still, and your standard 15 watt wireless charging. So when it comes to charging and battery, you cannot beat this guy. Oh, and by the way, I haven't mentioned this. This color is phenomenal. It's velvety and feels great to hold, but that's besides the point. It's just on another level with its battery capability and charging capabilities. I can set this on the wireless charger and charge it just as fast or faster than the wired charger on the S25 Ultra. So if you are very particular about your charging speeds, you hate charging and it takes forever, and you want something super fast, the OnePlus Open 13 is definitely going to be that guy for you. What else sets these apart? Both are water resistant with IP68 and IP69 on this guy. The OS, of course, on both of them are Android with the skins from both of these companies. You'll get the One UI Samsung variant with just a lot of Samsung software packed on top of Android, where you'll get a little bit more of a minimalist experience with Oxygen OS. Myself, personally, I prefer Oxygen OS. Now, One UI does have its benefits. A lot of it comes to Good Launcher and downloading those third-party apps to really unlock a lot of features on this device. So look into Good Launcher if you really, really want to unlock the full power of the Samsung devices. Any of the S25 line can support Good Launcher, and basically it's a set of apps within it that you can download to customize how fast screen resolution is, to how things open, to customizing icon packs, to the lock screen settings, to the power button settings. You have way more customizing options once you unlock Good Lock. What else do these phones bring beyond their OS variants? Well, Samsung, of course, has this guy, the S Pen. And even though it's a little controversial this year because they removed features from it that I guess only 1% of people used, which means there is no battery in it for Bluetooth use anymore. So you have no longer the air gesture swipe features. One thing I was concerned about how that really worked because of the type of pen and Wacom they use. Do you still get the cursor on the screen? you do get the cursor still when you move around the pen. So that eliminated that worry for me, because that personally is more of a bigger thing to me when I'm using small navigated areas or drawing or something. I want to see where my pen will be laying on the screen. So beyond, of course, the S Pen, there's a lot of Samsung features, kind of like what I talked with Good Lock, or other features built in. Samsung, of course, has the secure folder. Samsung has the pro features to the camera. Samsung has many Samsung apps like a browser. Samsung has their own gallery, their clock, their own widget section. They have stackable widgets. They have literally a whole section of folder by default that throws in several Samsung apps. You don't get that really as much on the OnePlus. So it depends on how much you're really using these Samsung services. Likely, if you've on a Samsung phone, you've gotten used to those extra apps. You may even use some of those extra apps. But I would argue with you, do you really need those apps, or would you feel like a little bit more of a clean experience? Samsung ultimately still does better at software because of two reasons. Software security updates are much faster. OS versions are much faster on this than OnePlus is now. OnePlus is pretty good, but they're still further down in the competition of getting updates out. Most importantly, Samsung's been on a roll of supporting 7 years of updates. That's in line with what the Pixels do. We'll only get, I believe it's 3 or 4 years out of the OnePlus 13. So really honestly, who's keeping their phone for 7 years? I mean, if you're keeping a phone for 7 years, kudos on keeping it alive and working that long. But, you know, most of us are probably doing 2 to 4 years. So doesn't really bother me that much, but it's something to keep in mind, especially with the consistency and the speed that Samsung releases their updates. Really at this point, you're probably wondering a lot of where I sit on this. And there's one big thing that personally to me, even beyond the S Pen, which I love the S Pen, I wish it was available on more devices. I wish other manufacturers would offer a pen option. I wish other manufacturers that made folding phones would support a pen. I myself like the pen features. I like writing, but I don't want to carry around something extra like a pen, paper, pad when I feel like my phone can do it. And that's another thing that I feel like is great with the Samsung phones. They're packed with so much software, and one of those big features is the Samsung DeX. And I just did a video, that was my last video I did on it, but watch that. I'll go over Samsung DeX a little bit again, but basically it's a desktop-like experience. You can hook this up to a monitor and have a portable keyboard and mouse with you, and you basically have a desktop experience. There's so many options that you can do. You can just enable that on your Windows device and then connect to that via RDP, and now you have a full-fledged Windows device that you can access. Samsung DeX, I wish, was a feature that was more integrated into other Android phones. But DeX is only available certain Samsung phones. So you don't even get that option of a desktop experience on any other type of Android phone. Which do I feel is the best? These two devices you can't go wrong with. The thing I think that sets the decision apart vary for everyone. You may be a Samsung fan and you go with a Samsung phone every year or every other year, and that's perfectly fine. They are great devices now. But into this, the main reason why, $100 less than this guy. And what am I losing out on? The S Pen, which is starting to lose features, all of Samsung's software that after the first month I stopped using. 8 Elite processor in here, but the Samsung 8 Elite processor is overclocked. Notice a difference in everyday use? Absolutely not. Maybe in a couple high-intensive games like, let's say, Genshin Impact, but otherwise, you're not going to notice it on this. This device is even lighter. I like the back of this. If you're not a person that likes to use cases, it feels great to hold it. I feel like it's way more secure than this slippery device. There's just a lot of tiny little things that add up to me on why I considered this the preferred phone to go with this year. You'd be going with. For me, even if the cameras aren't up to par, plus open is what I go with. Even if the cameras aren't as up to par as S25 Ultra. Is it a major difference? No. It's maybe a little bit faster shutter speed on the S25 versus the OnePlus 13. Maybe you like the zoom a little bit further on this, even though I feel like the zoom on here, the quality is better. It's just a couple little things that make the cameras a little bit better on this. The video, of course, definitely with the log option. Enough to say $400 worth for this guy. 13, that's where I think it is this year. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Which one are you going with? Are you waiting for another device? Maybe you're waiting for the folding phones to come out from these guys. Well, disappointed in what the OnePlus has decided. You probably already know about that. So in the States, all we have to look forward to is the next Z Fold, or of course the Pixel. That's for another conversation. Which one are you going with this year? If you're picking up a new phone, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.